the last chance to express our thoughts. As many of us know, communicating our ideas and feelings can be rather complicated and difficult at times. How many times have people gotten into fights over a misunderstanding? How many people rehearse for hours when they are about to ask their crush on a date, or maybe propose to the one they love? How many times have people kept their most passionate thoughts locked up inside them because they fear being rejected or hurt afterwards? It may be difficult to express your thoughts as easily as you would like, but we still have the physical capacity to do so. Do you ever think about all the moments or chances where you wish you could have said something to an important person in your life but were too scared to do so? Do you find yourself frozen, your mind willing the words to come out, but your body is stuck as you stand there speechless? Or how about when you know this might be your last opportunity to tell someone you love them, since it will be a long time before you see them again, if at all? At some point in our lives, we reach our last chance to express our thoughts to anyone, or express our thoughts at all, as we arrive at the end of our lives. We evaluate our lives and ask ourselves, did I do everything I wanted to? Did I tell everyone special in my life everything that I wanted them to know? For example, that I love them. Do I have any regrets? Is there any unfinished business or some things I need to tend to before I feel ready to go? Near the end, it is often common to say goodbye or see everyone you love just one last time, for closure and to avoid painful regrets. However, your body is failing you as it prepares for closure as well. You cannot easily express yourself the way you once could when words flowed out of your mouth effortlessly with dynamic facial expressions to match. Now you barely have the energy to say a few words, if you even can, and just opening your eyes might be a major challenge. So cruel that one no longer has the physical capacity to express their final thoughts the way they once could during such a crucial and important time. Even though I am young and have many years to go, I still experience this as I sit next to my grandpa during his final days. To many, it appears as if he is asleep, unaware of what is happening, but if you look closely, you can catch his final expressions. The last day of my grandfather's life, I walked into the house to see him lying in bed with his eyes closed, almost still, except for the slight rising up and down of his lungs since breathing is now strenuous for him. I took his hand to greet him, and I saw his eyebrows rise up ever so slightly and hear him breathe just a slightly bigger sigh. A subtle message many would miss, yet touches me deeply. I feel thankful that I was insightful enough to catch his final expressions for me, and honored that he loved me enough to use an oomph of what little strength he had left to let me know. You kind of feel special, sort of like when your best friend tells you a secret and only the two of you know, or when you go through an important experience with someone and grow closer from it. Yet, it is more painful and depressing in this case. It was only a few days ago when I played a violin for him, and his sharp mind knew all the songs as he quickly recited every title. My grandma was the opposite. We saw her die mentally and emotionally at least 10 years before she physically died. She often seemed gone or similar to a child who couldn't really grasp the adult conversations. Naturally, it was difficult to know what she could comprehend or was aware of. I remember when I was quite a bit younger, in my teens, being there for her when she was about to have surgery for uterine cancer. As the operation was about to begin, someone tried to comfort me.
Don't worry, she doesn't know what's going on anyway. She's fine.
But when I looked into my grandmother's eyes, I saw fear. She knew, and I knew she knew, just like I knew Grandpa knew when I was present, when he was barely conscious. Grandma's eyes and mine locked for a few moments, long enough to communicate the terrified look on my face in response to hers. Hopefully, this let her know that I felt bad for her and wish I could help, but she was already being wheeled into the operation room before I could do anything else. I don't know if it eased Grandma to know I felt bad and was there for her, or if she felt comforted that someone knew and acknowledged how she felt at that time. But I do know she is a strong woman since she lived 10 years or so after that surgery. She was able to conquer dementia, cancer, many strokes, diabetes, and then some until she was almost 89 years old. As precious as it is to be able to read and understand their last oops of expression, our last thoughts are just as valuable. Last winter was the first time I would experience this when I heard my grandma was in the hospice. Naturally, I was going to visit her, but she wouldn't have a whole lot to say to me, and words aren't exactly my best form of communication either. I wanted to make it more meaningful by doing something nice for her. I knew she loved dogs and cats, as do I, and live with 7 dandy cats to show it. Too bad I couldn't bring one of them into the hospice, or at least I didn't think hospices allowed that, and even if I could, I wasn't sure if my roommate would be comfortable with that since he would have to feel that the cats would be safe driving with me to a strange place where anything could happen. Oh well, nice thought, I think to myself as I go off to visit Grandma. Grandpa is there holding her hand as I walk in. When he realized I had come to visit, he lit up and showed me artwork that my little cousin did, and we gabbed about life happenings amongst other thoughts. Strange now to think at that time, he seemed so full of life, able to have a stimulating conversation like those awesome 2-hour gabfests you have with a few interesting people who are able to captivate your mind. Some people might have heard me gloat about how brilliant he is. In fact, he's so brilliant, or we're so alike, that he read my thoughts and mentioned that the hospice is cool with feline visitors, as long as they are healthy and show records that they visited the kitty doctor recently. I was delighted at both the fact that hospices are animal-friendly and that Grandpa brought up the good news without me saying one word about cat visitors. I asked my roommate and he lit up as well, already knowing the perfect kitty for this. Tyson. My roommate thanked me several times and was ecstatic about Tyson having the opportunity to be in the hospice to brighten up someone's day. It was a go, and I eagerly drove Tie-Dye, aka Tyson, to the hospice. It was a success, as one of my grandma's remarks demonstrated this quite frankly. "When are you people going?" the kitty onto my bed? I had to chuckle since this is her way of letting us know she enjoyed having Tyson visit her. And as far as people go, who could blame her, since it was a little chaotic with 5 or so of us there, and I can relate to feeling more at ease in a calmer situation. Little did she or I know that she also did something nice for me that day. Tyson is a changed kitty from the hospice experience. Not only did he and I grow closer, but he is a much more empathetic, loving kitty compared to the somewhat aloof, just give me food type of cat. So whenever I see Tyson, who now crawls right up to my chest with his head close to mine and purrs loudly, I think of Grandma and how she was able to have such an awesome influence to this day. I couldn't have asked for a better experience to have for the last time I'd see Grandma. As far as my final moments with Grandpa, I feel somewhat bad. I wish I wasn't such a butt chunk and visited him more often than I did for support. I did fortunately see him a couple of times after Grandma's death, and without her, he looked to us grandchildren for support. Shortly after Grandma left, Grandpa needed to go to the hospital, so Christmas and Grandma's birthday, December 26th, was spent there with him. Probably one of the saddest yet touching Christmases I'll ever experience. I drove to the hospital and ran into my parents, my sister, and her boyfriend as we go to visit Grandpa, who has my aunt and uncle already there with him. We are all squished into a room with some cake and milk. We ate, chatted, and exchanged a few gifts. I decked out a collection of battery-powered cabinet lights for my gift to them by snazzing them up so they lit up the room with pretty colors, instead of original white fluorescent light that would have blended into the blank white walls of the hospital. I let my immediate family choose which light they liked the best. I give a blue-green light to Grandpa as well, and show him how it works, since the light looks like it's from another planet. A typical trait of my creations. But what I really remember was when Grandpa went through a little wave of pain. He took my hand for support, and the image of him holding my grandma's hand at the hospice popped into my head. Thinking about it now brings on a whirl of emotions, even crazier than the lights I made. I felt moved, yet sad at the same time as I held his hand. He asked me if I could play violin for him the next time I saw him. Sure, I said, as the thought of, I gotta brush up on the violin so I can play up to my standards for him, ran through my mind. What can I say? I guess the apple seed doesn't fall far from the apple tree either. In January, though, I had a klutzy-me moment, and managed to masker my eye with an exercise bungee cord. I looked like the kid of Frankenstein, and the dog from the Little Rascals since I managed to get a red ring under my other eye from the cord in addition to the swollen eye. My vision is hindered somewhat too. Being rather visual, this threw me into frustration since I tried to resume my usual mad artist festivities, and this added to the depression I already was feeling. At times, I couldn't really bring myself up to do a whole lot, even managed to sleep off a 2-week period. On top of the morbid zombie thoughts, I thought about Grandpa and his request, which I felt guilty about more and more as time went by and I hadn't visited him. Yet, I was also frustrated with myself since I wasn't really playing violin up to par, a vicious cycle that drove myself into even more depression. I got his phone number and thought about calling him, but I felt too foolish to just call him, so I tooted around wondering what to do like a stupid butt nugget, debating whether it was a chicken or the egg that led up to its existence. I finally go to the eye doctor a few months later to see what is going on, and find out my retina is detached. Kinda like the way I am from the world. Wee! How dandy. This explains a bit. Thankfully, Grandpa and my family members rooted for me, so I was able to get the surgery. Relieved that they helped me so I wouldn't go half blind, I vowed to myself that I would jam out the violin as soon as I could so I could play for Grandpa. I wouldn't feel right until I did. Funny how life works. It was shortly after my surgery that I found out Grandpa only has a week or so left to live. My mom and uncle had brought him home and decided they would care for him there until the end. Once again, I am overwhelmed by intense feelings. I feel regrets for not seeing him and a surge of urgency to swallow my goddamn pride and see him to thank him and apologize to him because I hadn't visited him earlier to play the violin. My older sister was kind enough to drive me there, so we visited him together. He looks fragile as ever since cancer has eaten away much of his body, yet his mind is still sharp as ever. I think this might have been the last day that he was still his usual self since the painkillers made him a wee bit spacey. Bless his soul, he was very understanding when I apologized. I held his hand again and gave him a kiss on his forehead, something he always did when he said goodbye to my sisters and me. Later on, during that visit, I went with Alexa into the other room to prep for the mini violin rehearsal. Since I couldn't really see well, she was kind enough to cover for me and play violin for Grandpa instead. I gladly let her borrow mine. I gotta admit, I really haven't kept up on the violin playing that well, she admitted as she started getting the violin ready. I let her know I was also guilty so she didn't have to feel bad. She started to play the violin and has a little difficulty trying to adjust to the feel of my violin instead of her own, a common challenge for many musicians, kinda similar to becoming familiar with the new car instead of your old rusty mobile. As she is warming up and getting the feel of my violin, the surge of inspiration bursts through me and urges me to try to play the violin since this could be my last chance. I knew that I needed to play the violin for Grandpa or else I would have regrets for the rest of my life and lose my integrity as well. Alexa is kind enough to hand over the violin. After a few songs, we agree that I play. I played a few rottenly pitched notes also, but I would rather do a halfway decent performance than miss the opportunity to play music for Grandpa one last time. Maybe Alexa saw that when she encouraged me to play for Grandpa instead. I gotta thank my lucky stars, which neutralized the stars I saw after whacking my eyeball out with a bungee cord, that I was able to play violin for Grandpa one last time. The following day, I practiced my violin tunnel vision style while using curse words here and there in my pep talks as if I were a pirate cheerleader. I did have the eye patch, so it works, eh? I was somewhat exhausted afterwards, and probably brought down my IQ to that of a cheerleader's, since my brain felt fried too. Funny how life still works. Only moments after I put down the violin that day, my younger sister called to let me know that Grandpa isn't doing so hot. She was kind enough to give me a ride to Grandpa's, and I mustered up some energy to play some more violin. When my sister and I arrived, Grandpa was grimacing in pain, and we knew the violin playing would ease him. The music cram jam paid off that day, which is swanky, since I didn't want to end things on a sour note. As I continued to play, passion stirred up inside of me. That's when spirituality granted me the gift to really make my violin sing more and more, since I wanted to play wonderfully for the right reasons. Grandpa deserved to hear me play the best I could for him, and then some. I then proceeded to massage him for a few more hours until he fell asleep. It felt good to be able to relax him and ease his pain that night, since I wasn't there for him a lot during the past few months of his life that were filled with physical, emotional, and mental pain. It was the least I could do, and thankfully my regrets are minimalized. I visited him the following day, which would be the last time I'd see him, bringing me back to the last moments of expressing our thoughts. Overall, I'm pretty lucky since both experiences, even if sad, had meaning to it. The third type of communication dealing with the end of life is what life tells you itself. It is easy to miss these messages too, but when you see them, it shows you just how mystical life can be. In Grandma's case, I was able to bring Tyson to see her on the last good day of her life before she fell into a sleep that eventually led to death. Thank you, life, for letting me make it just in the nick of time. She died in the middle of a snowstorm. I remember that morning looking out to see the flakes and thinking to myself that Grandma was going to die during the snowstorm. Later on, I found out my younger sister had the same intuition. She was there for Grandma when she passed away during the storm later that morning. Grandma died 17 days before her birthday. Oddly enough, I believe it was either that day or when we had her funeral that I went into a gas station and blindly pulled up to whatever pump was open. As I stepped outside to check what pump number it was to get gas, I was baffled to see the number 17. Life had a few messages for me when Grandpa passed away too. I'm thankful that I was able to make it in time to see and play violin for him, more so a gift to me and him rather than a message from life. It wasn't quite raining yet when he passed in the wee early morning hours of 1:30, but later on, it did rain that day. I pointed this out to my younger sister, who responded that it was a little late. But then again, Grandpa didn't join Grandma at the same time either. He joined a little later, just like the rain. My dad, who lives in Carolina with my mom, sent a flower to my Grandpa since he couldn't make it up to Minnesota right away. My younger sister noticed the flower dying as Grandpa neared the end of his life. Sure enough, the flower died the same day he did. Oddly enough, too, Dad and I were both awake when he passed as well. Looking at family photos, it's apparent that Dad and I have Grandpa's features. Even our personalities and interests are similar in some ways, such as a passion for music and being stubborn when it comes to being self-dependent. The day Grandpa passed away was the day that I found out my retina was attached again. I wish I could have told him that, since this was his last major kind deed for me, offering to help pay for the surgery. He suffered from macular degeneration, coincidentally enough, so maybe life wanted him to be in a better place and state of being so he could actually see me receive the good news about my vision. As far as life's messages to me when it comes to both of their lives, it's funny. After Grandma's death, my dad initially requested that we all write a note in memory of Grandma so that he could put it on a webpage dedicated to her. Welp, if you couldn't tell by this note, I'll be blunt.
Words be me best communication way not.
Needless to say, I was lost as to what I should write, so I never got around to it. However, after Grandpa passed, several thoughts popped up in my kooky brain, and I found myself eager to get everything out on paper. However, it wasn't only on Grandpa. There were thoughts on Grandma too that desperately needed to come out. Funny how Grandpa was so lost and miserable without Grandma, just as I was lost on what to write on just Grandma's death. Now that he has joined her, I write this in memory of both of them. And one really could see that Grandma and Grandpa truly did love each other, and both were passionate about life and lived it to its fullest. Who else would sell their sailboat to marry someone they loved? Go Grandma. I wonder if she ever wore an eye patch too. And who took care of their spouse while having 2 heart attacks and cancer without saying a word, and still had doubts whether he was a good enough husband? They truly were one of the rare married couples that one would only see in a fairy tale. They deserve to be together, and this is why I'll honor them by remembering them both together. Adria Sorensen, May 3rd, 2010. An additional note from my father, Dane Sorensen. The music was done by Adria Sorensen called Grandpa's Flight. Adria played this original composition to her grandfather on 3 occasions, the last being Tuesday, April 27th, 2010. Candy asked him if he enjoyed the violin music, and he answered yes in a very soft voice. That was Neal Sr.'s last words before he died.